Americans have been. I'm Bev Smith, and I've traveled to the Holy Land and a very special place called Dimona, Israel, to bring you this special edition of Our Voices. Since 1967, hundreds of African Americans have been returning to Israel, stating that they have a claim, a rightful claim, as Hebrew Israelites to the Holy Land. The debate continues as the U.S. and Israeli government ponders the question, why Israel and not Africa? Israel. It's called the holiest of holy lands in the world, the land of milk and honey, the place where Moses led former slaves out of bondage. It's a land where politics and religion have gone hand in hand for thousands of years. It's no surprise that a group of African Americans, descendants of slaves themselves, would seek out the promised land for their freedom. Frustrated with America's racism and feeling disenfranchised from American society, they journeyed to Israel for a taste of freedom. I wanted to know why these blacks felt they had a claim to Israel. So I went to the city of Dimona where they settled, and I learned it began with a dream, a vision had by Ben-Ami, the man they call the anointed spiritual leader of the African Hebrew Israelite. How did you know that the voice and the vision was truly sent from God?
I did not know. You know, that's the key element to faith. See, the words were so powerful when the angel Gabriel came to bring the message that it was time to start the journey back. I did not know. As a matter of fact, I felt like Moses in the wilderness of sin. I really wanted to talk a little bit more to Gabriel and to ask him to show me his credentials and to pose the question to the Creator. How would I know if these things would truly come to pass? But that was it. I had to walk out on the water by faith, not knowing if these things truly would come to pass or not. There was no further message at that time except that it was time to declare the Exodus in 1967. There I was in February of 1966, pondering, how would I convince any significant number of African Americans to, in fact, leave the United States in less than 2 years?
But did you question in your soul and in your spirit why Israel and not Africa? Or was it one and the same to you?
No, at that time, that I knew that Israel was northeastern Africa, only to be separated by the Suez Canal. But there were so many things that I did not know at that time when the word of God did come.
Ben-Ami says the message spoken to him was so powerful that his mission would guide him on a journey through Liberia, then onward to Israel. Why through Liberia? Why not a plane directly to Israel?
Because we had to sojourn. The words in the book of Revelation had forewarned us that we would have to sojourn in the interior of Liberia, as our fathers in the wilderness of Sin. They had to sojourn there in preparation for their entry into the promised land. We had to prepare ourselves in the wilderness of Liberia. And as we go back now historically once again, I did not know that it would be Liberia. It says that we should return to the promised land in the same manner that we had journeyed from the promised land.
Under the spiritual leadership of Ben-Ami, the first pilgrims made their way to Liberia. It wasn't an easy journey, and they suffered the raft of the jungle. It was an inconvenience they were willing to endure because the alternative was life in America.
I remember the bush, where we lived at. I remember things like almost getting bit by a snake. I remember being attacked by driver ants. I remember the little chickens that used to run through the house, through a little tent and be in the kitchen. And I remember my friends. I remember my grandmother in her home. And
your whole family went?
Yes.
She remembers snakes. Why Liberia?
Liberia was in 1821 set up for freed slaves by the United States government. We didn't know where to go. When the word came to us that we had to go back to Africa, we didn't know where to go. We were young men. But someone stood up and said, Liberia is the place. Why Liberia? Because that's the place where it has an open door policy for black Americans. And so then that's the direction that we went. That was the West Coast. We knew we were picked up on the West Coast, and we were going back, retracing our steps. And at the same time, fulfilling the prophecies, going back by way of the wilderness to be tried by the God of Israel.
I wondered what would make people believe Ben-Ami's vision. And in most cases, it came down to personal convictions and wanting change. But you have homes, you have families, you have ways of life. You know nothing about this new land, whether you will be accepted or what. What makes you decide to give it all up? I'm looking at you to ask the question.
Well, I'll have to go back to Chicago too, and then my learning about the Exodus, what we call the Exodus, which is leaping up out of America, going to the land of Israel, because this was our home, it was the promised land. And learning that we were not Americans, that we were brought to America as slaves. We were never American citizens like that. We were more like American subjects. I was working at a company called Wrigley's Chewing Gum Factory. I'd been working there some 14 years. Thought I was kind of secure, but it was something from within upon hearing the word from Ben-Ami that he had received a vision from the God of Israel, that it was time to begin the journey back to Israel. And it was something about that I guess it would have to be God himself, that I knew I had to go.
You didn't say, is this the voice of God, or is this Charlton Heston?
No, I based it on facts. As we began to study and to learn and to be taught from the Bible, which we see as a history book, the most authentic history book that we could find even today. And we began to trace our history from that book. And that began to open up so many channels in our minds that the calling was there. The calling was by the prophets of old. It was always there. For example, in the book of Deuteronomy, 30th chapter, verse 1 through 7, it says that when all these curses, and we know we were under curse because there's no way that we could have been in the condition that we were in without being cursed by God.
And so now you're in Liberia.
Mm-hmm.
Your children are in Liberia. And then, but your goal is to get to Israel. How do you translate Liberia to Israel?
Well, we're yet being chartered by the Holy Spirit and the prophecies of the God of Israel.
Yet being chartered.
Yes, you see, the prophets of old laid out a chartered a way back for us. And so we were to go through the wilderness, as written in the book of Ezekiel. And there in the wilderness we would be tried by the Holy One of Israel and pleaded with face to face. And so Liberia, we didn't go into the capital city, Monrovia, but we went 110 miles into the bush. When I say bush, I mean jungle. Raw jungle. The grass would grow so fast, as soon as you would cut it, you could see it growing back. So there we went, and with tents, very green, neophytes, not knowing, really, not going, we didn't spend too much time overnight in the forest preserves. But here we were in the bush, really not knowing how to handle ourselves. Because we arrived at a time, I think it was close to the rainy season, and when it rained on those tents, she didn't say that I'll give you the whole story, but the water came through the tents.
You couldn't keep anything dry.
No, until we became, the Liberians taught us, well, you need to build a rafter to sit them on.
Oh, you say the Liberians taught you.
Yeah.
Was there an automatic welcome home, brother, from them? And you all can join in now. I don't want to point, well, this is not a classroom. And I couldn't give you directions anyway. This is not a classroom, but I want you all to join in and have a conversation.
Great.
And to the young ones, with the driver ants, you can remember, join in. Go ahead.
Well, Upon our arrival, my family, I went to Liberia, myself and 5 children. Just myself and 5 children. I left my former wife, which she refused to accept anything that I was talking about. I said I was crazy and thus and thus and thus.
So you took the children?
I took the children. And I left.
Today it would be called kidnapping. You know that, don't you?
The oldest one was 11 years old and the youngest one was 9 months.
You took 5 kids without a woman to the bush of Liberia during the rainy season because you heard God and you were on your way to Israel?
I was on my way to Israel.
Do you wonder, darling, why she called you crazy? When you come to Israel, there are papers that must be had. There are proper identification that must be had. There is the government that must look at these papers and allow you in. You didn't have the papers, did you? So what did you do? Let's hear from you. What did you do?
Well, we came. I was in the second group. We came in 2 groups after Prince Gabriel had came in. Was 1968, you came?
I came in 1969.
1969. There were 2 groups that came. I was with the second group. And the first group that came in, which Rizisha was in, and they held them there at the airport, 24 hours or something before they would even, made places for them. When I came...
Hold that for a moment. You had all your children and you had to stay at the airport?
Yes. The baby was 4 months old. And I had 5 children by that time. And they took us to a secluded part of the airport and told us to have a seat while they were Prince Kesiyahu met us there while he was making arrangements for us to be accepted under the law of return. And so we spent the night there, and people in the airport were bringing us sandwiches and drinks and bottles for the baby, and old people in the airport were crying, and they were saying, the people have come home, the people have come home. And
these are white Israelis.
Yes.
So wait. White Israelis recognized that you were the people.
Right,
Yes.
right.
The government of Israel held you up.
Yes.
At that time.
Arriving into Israel didn't go as smoothly as they expected. The Israeli government was not anxious to welcome them, and so I asked the ambassador at large of the African Hebrew Israelites, Prince Asiel ben Israel, to explain why.
So when we appeared on the scene here in Israel, they were prepared to receive us if we were nice Negroes and would accept the definition of how they defined us. But when we said that we were the descendants of the biblical Israelites, we then took charge of our destiny. And that began the problem, because now we were free African Americans talking and defining our future, not according to the past of someone else's definition, but how we now received and perceived ourselves.
Obtaining Israeli citizenship has been a continual battle for the African Hebrew Israelites. It's been nearly 30 years and still no citizenship. They were surprised by the delay because Israel's law of return guaranteed citizenship status. But the law of return was clear.
Yes.
The law said that if you have a claim to the land, you are a citizen. Claim to the land was spelled out. 1, you must be born of a Jewish mother. Did African Americans from Israel, on their way to Israel, fit in anywhere in the law of return?
Absolutely. In 1969, when we first arrived here, the law of return simply said you had to believe that you were a Jew in your heart and worship and keep the laws of the God of Israel in the state. We met the total criteria from December of 1969, but by March of 1970, the law was changed to read that you had to be born of a Jewish mother or convert to Judaism according to halakha, a European form of Judaism. They tried to factor us out of it because now the door was open, because we came basing it on biblical truth and not traditions of man that established who were the true descendants of this land.
It seemed to me that in order for the African Hebrew Israelites to become citizens, they needed allies in the Israeli government. The first ally was Jacques Amir, who was a member of the Knesset and later the mayor of Dimona.
What made